Story 1. Lawrence Caldwell Jr. was born on March 1, 1969. He grew up in the area of Grants Pass, Oregon. His father was named Lawrence Caldwell Sr. His mother was named Ruby Culp. They lived in a rural part of the state. When Lawrence was a young boy, he began to show signs of trouble. He ran away from home. He started a fire. He was cruel to animals. These were not normal childhood mistakes. Each time he did something wrong, his parents may have known, but he kept going further. At the age of 12, Lawrence committed a burglary. He broke into a school in Oregon. He was caught. This was his first conviction. The court found him guilty of breaking into the school. This was the start of his official criminal record. As a teenager, Lawrence did not stop. He continued to break the law. He stole things. He committed theft. He also committed forgery, which means he made fake documents or signatures to get money or goods. He stole a car. He was arrested multiple times. Each crime led to another. He did not learn from his mistakes. Lawrence dropped out of high school. He did not finish his education. He did not get a diploma. After leaving school, he worked at a fast food restaurant in Grants Pass. That was one of his few jobs. He did not have a long work history or a career. At the age of 18, Lawrence committed a serious crime. He used a rifle to kidnap his former girlfriend. She had worked with him at the fast food restaurant. He took her against her will. He used a gun to control her. This was not a small offense. It was a violent felony. For that crime, Lawrence went to prison. He was sentenced in August 1988. He served time in an Oregon prison. While inside, he did not behave well. Records show that he seduced a female prison guard. Then he bragged about it to other inmates. This showed that he was manipulative. He knew how to get what he wanted from people. During his time in prison, Lawrence also began to talk about killing. He told people that he had been thinking about murdering someone since 1988. He studied Latin. He learned anatomy. He wanted to understand how the human body works so he could figure out how to kill people. Psychiatrists who later examined him said he had a serious delusional disorder. They also said he was antisocial to the point of being psychopathic. This meant he did not care about other people's feelings or rights. Lawrence also wrote letters while in prison. He wrote to police agencies. He wrote to public officials. He asked them to investigate a conspiracy against him. He believed people were trying to get him. He also wrote to President Bill Clinton and to Hillary Clinton. In those letters, he warned them about dangerous gang activity. He claimed to be part of a secret white-only group called Murces Constrata. He said that name was Latin for mercenary of the country. He used an alias name as well, Charles Durant. These beliefs were not based on reality, but he held them firmly. Lawrence was released on parole in June 1993. He had served about 5 years for the kidnapping. When he got out, he was 24 years old. He was free to live in society again. But he had not changed. He had been talking about killing someone for years. He had a long criminal record starting from age 12. He had no steady job. He had no real plans for a normal life. He had a girlfriend, but even that relationship would lead him down a darker path. That is where his early life ends. He was out of prison on parole. He was living in Oregon, but he was not done breaking the law. After his release from prison in June 1993, Lawrence Caldwell Jr. lived in Oregon. He had a girlfriend named Marilee Paul. She was also called Marilee Paul in some records. The two of them stayed together. Lawrence had been out on parole for less than a year when things got worse. Lawrence and Marilee decided to leave Oregon. They traveled to Michigan. Their plan was to set up an underground marijuana farm. They wanted to grow and sell marijuana for money. But the plan did not work. They ran out of money quickly. They had no steady income. They could not afford to keep going. In March 1994, Lawrence and Marilee went to Las Vegas, Nevada. They were looking for money or a way to get cash. They did not have jobs. They did not have a legal way to support themselves. so they decided to commit crimes. Lawrence had been talking about killing someone since 1988. He had told people in prison that he wanted to murder. Now he was out, and he had a chance to act on those thoughts. He planned for weeks to kill someone. He did not have a specific victim in mind at first. He just wanted to murder a person for the experience. On March 10th, 1994, Lawrence and Marilee went to the Tropicana Hotel in Las Vegas. This was a large hotel with many tourists. They came up with a plan. Marilee would pretend to be a prostitute. She would find a male victim. She would go with him to his hotel room. Then she would rob him. Lawrence would help her. Marilee found a man at the hotel. His name was Frank Rosenstock. He was 76 years old. Frank was a retired furrier from New York. He had worked in the fur business in Brooklyn. He was a widower. He had retired to the Fort Lauderdale area in Florida. He was visiting Las Vegas on vacation. He was staying at the Tropicana Hotel alone. Marilee approached Frank. She pretended she wanted to have sex with him. He agreed to go with her to his room. She went with him to his hotel room. This was the pretext, which means the fake reason she used to get inside. Once they were in the room, Marilee told Frank to get into the bathtub. He did what she said. While he was in the bathtub, Marilee searched through his belongings. She looked for money and valuable items, but she did not find anything worth taking. So she called Lawrence on the telephone. He was waiting in the hotel lobby. She told him to come up. He said, "Wait there," and then he went to the room. Lawrence knocked on the door. He pretended to be a security guard. He showed a fake badge. Marilee opened the door and let him in. Lawrence told Frank Rosenstock that he was being arrested for solicitation. Solicitation means asking someone for sex in exchange for money. Lawrence made Frank believe he was in trouble with the law. Lawrence put handcuffs on Frank. Frank could not move his hands. He was trapped. Then Lawrence found Frank's wallet. He took it from him. The wallet contained credit cards and cash. Lawrence took 91 in cash from the wallet. He also took the credit cards, but Frank had hidden 91 in cash from the wallet. He also took the credit cards, but Frank had hidden 300 in a sock. Lawrence did not find that money. He missed it. After taking the wallet, Lawrence took Frank's belt. He wrapped the belt around Frank's throat. He looped the belt through the buckle to make a tight circle. Then he pulled. He strangled Frank while Frank was handcuffed and could not fight back. During the strangulation, Lawrence pulled Frank off the bed. Frank slid down to the floor. Lawrence put his foot on Frank's shoulders. He pulled the belt tighter. He told Marilee that it took a person 6 to 8 minutes to die from strangulation. He knew this because he had studied anatomy. He knew how long it would take to kill someone. Lawrence kept pulling the belt for at least 5 minutes. He watched Frank's face turn purple. He waited until he could see that Frank was no longer breathing. Then he removed the belt. Frank Rosenstock was dead on the floor. He was face down. He had been handcuffed and strangled with his own belt. After the killing, Lawrence and Marilee wiped down the room with wet rags. They did this to remove their fingerprints. They did not want to leave evidence behind. They took many items from the room. They put these items in Frank's suitcase. They took the belt Lawrence had used to strangle Frank. They also took glasses and ashtrays that they might have touched. Lawrence kept the buckle from the belt as a souvenir. Then they left the room. They went to another motel called the Royal Oasis Motel. After the murder, Lawrence and Marilee had sex and ate breakfast. They acted as if nothing had happened. The two of them left Las Vegas. They went to Palm Springs, California. There they met a man named Kenneth Abel. Lawrence told Kenneth about killing Frank Rosenstock. He bragged about what he had done. Then, using Kenneth's car, Lawrence and Marilee drove to Oregon. Back in Oregon, Lawrence visited a former cellmate from prison. This cellmate later said that Lawrence was threatening and manipulative. Lawrence told this cellmate that he wanted to rob a military armory. He wanted to steal weapons and form a militia-like criminal gang. He still had dangerous plans. While Lawrence was in Oregon, he also visited his mother, Ruby Culp, at a trailer park in Myrtle Creek, Oregon. But he had broken the conditions of his parole by leaving Nevada and committing crimes. He was arrested for a parole violation and put in jail in Grants Pass, Oregon. He did not know it yet, but his former cellmate would later talk to the police and give them a tip that led to Lawrence's capture. During this time, no one had yet discovered Frank Rosenstock's body in the Tropicana hotel room. No police had been called. No investigation had started. Lawrence was in a jail in Oregon for a different reason. He thought he had gotten away with murder. While Lawrence Caldwell Jr. sat in the Grants Pass jail in Oregon for a parole violation, someone came forward to the police. That person was his former cellmate from prison. The cellmate had spoken with Lawrence after the murder. Lawrence had told him about killing an old man in Las Vegas. The cellmate gave a tip to the authorities. This tip led police to start looking into Lawrence's actions in Nevada. At the same time, housekeeping staff at the Tropicana Hotel in Las Vegas entered Frank Rosenstock's room. They found him lying face down on the floor. He was dead. He was still handcuffed. The hotel called the police. The Las Vegas police arrived and began their investigation. They found that the room had been wiped down. There were few fingerprints, but they found Frank's body and the belt with the missing buckle. They also found that his wallet was empty of cash and credit cards. The police in Las Vegas and the police in Oregon began to communicate. They learned that Lawrence Caldwell and Marilee Paul were suspects. The former cellmate's tip gave them a clear direction. The police in Oregon arrested Lawrence on the parole violation, but now they also held him on suspicion of murder. Marilee Paul did not wait to be arrested. She turned herself in to the authorities in Oregon. She decided to cooperate with the police. She told them everything that happened. She explained how she and Lawrence planned the robbery. She described how Lawrence pretended to be a security guard. She said she watched him strangle Frank Rosenstock with the belt. She gave details about the bathtub, the handcuffs, and how they wiped down the room. She also told police about the money and the credit cards. Because Marilee cooperated, she made a deal with the prosecutors. She agreed to plead guilty to first-degree murder. In exchange, the state of Nevada agreed to recommend a sentence of life in prison with the possibility of parole. She would have to testify against Lawrence in court. She accepted this deal. Lawrence was arrested and taken back to Nevada. He was arraigned, which means he was brought before a judge to hear the charges. The state initially told the court that it would not seek the death penalty, but Lawrence did not want that. He wanted to die. He told the prosecutors that he would plead guilty to all charges if they changed their position and sought the death penalty. The state agreed. They filed a notice of intent to seek the death penalty. Lawrence also asked to represent himself in court. He did not want a lawyer to defend him. The judge held a hearing to make sure Lawrence understood what he was doing. The judge allowed Lawrence to represent himself, but the judge appointed a standby lawyer to help if Lawrence changed his mind. Lawrence pleaded guilty to 3 charges. The first was first-degree murder. The second was robbery of a victim 65 years of age or older. The third was burglary. He admitted that he did all of these things. Then he asked for the penalty hearing to happen as quickly as possible. He did not want to wait. The penalty hearing took place before a panel of 3 judges. It lasted 2 days. Lawrence acted as his own lawyer. He did not cross-examine the witnesses in a meaningful way. In fact, he tried to bring out damaging evidence that the prosecutors had not even mentioned. He did not object to any of the state's evidence. The 3 judges noticed that Lawrence was not defending himself. One of them commented on it. Lawrence refused to introduce any mitigating evidence. Mitigating evidence is information that could convince a judge to give a lesser sentence, such as a difficult childhood or mental health problems. Lawrence did not want a lesser sentence. He wanted death. Before the closing arguments, the judges explained to Lawrence that he had the right to speak and to present evidence. He still refused. During the closing argument, the prosecutor listed 7 aggravating factors. These were reasons why Lawrence deserved the death penalty. The prosecutor also said there were no mitigating factors. Then Lawrence gave his own closing argument. He asked the 3 judges to sentence him to death. Before they made their final decision, the judges gave Lawrence one more chance to present mitigating evidence. He said no. The 3 judges found that 4 of the 7 aggravating factors were true. They found that there were no mitigating circumstances. They voted unanimously to sentence Lawrence Caldwell Jr. to death. After the sentence, Lawrence appealed. He lost his appeal at the Nevada Supreme Court in 1996. He filed another appeal later, a state habeas corpus petition. The Nevada Supreme Court denied that as well in 2002. The court said that a U.S. Supreme Court decision about 3-judge panels did not apply to his case retroactively. That meant his death sentence stayed in place. At that point, Lawrence could have appealed to the federal courts. He could have asked for a stay of execution. Many death row inmates do this. But Lawrence did not want to. He told a federal judge that he was 99.99% certain he wanted to be executed. He said, "I'm tired of this." The federal judge, Howard McKibben, held a hearing to make sure Lawrence was competent. Lawrence was polite. He answered all questions. He said he understood the difference between life and death. The judge found that Lawrence was competent to make this decision. The judge also said he would sign a stay of execution at the last minute if Lawrence changed his mind and asked for it. Lawrence did not change his mind. He told his lawyer that he would not ask for a stay. He set a deadline for himself. If he was going to stop the execution, he would do it by March 24, 2004. March 24th came and went. He did nothing to stop it. On March 26, 2004, Lawrence Caldwell Jr. was scheduled to die at 9 p.m. at the Nevada State Prison in Carson City. That morning, he had a last meal. He asked for a grilled cheeseburger with onions, pickles, and tomatoes. He also had French fries. He wanted 3 slices of cheese and pepperoni pizza. He asked for 3 pints of ice cream, vanilla, chocolate, and chocolate chip. He had water, a 20-ounce Coke, and a 20-ounce Pepsi. He also had fruit, an apple, a banana, and an orange. He ate this meal at around 4 p.m. During the day, Lawrence met with his parents. They wanted him to continue his appeals. They did not want him to die. But Lawrence would not change his mind. He also met with a Catholic priest. He had recently become Catholic. He smoked many cigarettes. He did not take any sedatives. At about 7 p.m., his federal public defender, Michael Pacetta, visited him. He read a letter that Lawrence had written. The letter said that Lawrence would not stop the execution. At 8:52 p.m., Lawrence was led into the execution chamber. This was the old gas chamber at the prison. He was in handcuffs. He wore jeans, a blue cotton shirt, and shiny black boots. He walked from a cell across the hallway. He was strapped down on a padded gurney with 8 automobile seat belts. A needle was inserted into his right arm. The needle was connected to 3 drugs. The first drug would put him to sleep. The second would stop his breathing. The third would stop his heart. Lawrence closed his eyes when he entered the room. He never opened them again. He did not say a single word. The drugs were injected at 9:02 p.m. Lawrence died at 9:08 p.m. He was pronounced dead by a doctor. He was 35 years old. He had been on death row for about 9 years. Frank Rosenstock's 2 children, Terry Rosenstock and Mindy Dinberg, witnessed the execution. Afterward, Terry read a statement. He said that after 10 years of following the case and many trips to Nevada, they finally had justice. But he said the execution did not bring closure. It was just the end of another painful chapter. Lawrence Caldwell Sr. and Ruby Culp were at the prison, but they did not witness the execution. They did not speak to the media. Lawrence's body was cremated at his request and his parents' request. Marilee Paul, the girlfriend who helped commit the murder and then turned herself in, served her sentence. She was eligible for parole. A parole hearing was scheduled for May 2004, just 2 months after the execution. Terry Rosenstock planned to attend that hearing and speak against her release. Lawrence Caldwell Jr. asked to die. He said the murder was for the kicks of it. He said killing Frank Rosenstock was like taking a walk in the park. He never apologized. He gave no final statement. He closed his eyes and died without a word. The state of Nevada carried out his wish on March 26, 2004. Story 2. William Dean Wickline was born on March 15, 1952. He was born in the state of West Virginia. His parents were white. They worked hard and did not have much money. William had 2 younger brothers. The family lived together in a regular house in a normal neighborhood. William grew up like most children around him. He went to school. He was not known as a very good student. He also was not known as a troublemaker when he was very young. He finished high school. After high school, he did not go to college. He started working. When William was 16 years old, he began using drugs. This was in 1968. He started with marijuana or pills. Later he moved to stronger drugs like cocaine. His drug use became a regular part of his life. He also started committing small crimes. The first crimes William committed were burglaries. Breaking and entering became his pattern. He would go into houses or buildings when no one was there. He would take things that did not belong to him. He was caught more than once. Because of these burglaries, William was sent to prison. This was in the 1970s. While he was in prison, he got a job. The prison had a slaughterhouse. A slaughterhouse is a place where animals are killed and cut into meat. William worked in that slaughterhouse. He learned how to butcher animals. He learned how to use knives and saws on meat. He became very good at this work. In 1974, while William was in prison, a psychologist evaluated him. The psychologist wrote that William got along fairly well with his parents and his 2 brothers. The report did not say William had a bad childhood. It did not say he was abused. It just said he was doing okay with his family. In 1978, William was still working in the prison slaughterhouse. His supervisor wrote a report about him. The supervisor said William did exceptional work. The supervisor praised William's butchering skills. William knew how to cut meat cleanly and quickly. William was released from prison after serving time for burglary. He went back to living in Ohio. He lived in the city of Columbus. He had relationships with women. One woman became his common-law wife. A common-law wife is a woman you live with like a wife, but without a legal marriage. He also had a girlfriend named Teresa Kemp. Teresa would later become very important in his story. William still used drugs. He also sold drugs to other people. Cocaine was one of the drugs he sold. He owed money to some people, and other people owed money to him. This was normal in the drug world he lived in. He had a temper. People who knew him said he could be scary. He had eyes that made people feel afraid. William also had a friend named Christopher Lurch. Christopher was married to a woman named Peggy Lurch. The Lurks lived in Blendon Township, which is north of Columbus. William knew the Lurks well. They used drugs together. They drank alcohol together. They owed William money for drugs. The amount was $6,000. In the summer of 1982, William was 30 years old. He had been in and out of prison for burglary. He had worked as a prison slaughterhouse butcher. He used and sold cocaine. He had a girlfriend named Teresa Kemp. He had friends named Christopher and Peggy Lurch. And he was owed $6,000 in drug money. That summer, the 4 of them would spend a weekend together. They would drink alcohol. They would take cocaine. They would party for hours. And then something would go very wrong. The weekend began on August 12, 1982. That was a Thursday. William Wickline, his girlfriend Teresa Kemp, and the married couple Christopher and Peggy Lurch spent time together. They drank alcohol. They used cocaine. They also used other drugs. This went on for many hours. The party started at the Lurch's house. They kept drinking and taking drugs through the night. At some point, an argument began. The argument was about money. Christopher Lurch owed William Wickline $6,000. The money was for cocaine that William had sold to Christopher. Christopher had not paid William back. The argument grew louder. People were angry. But then the argument seemed to stop. The four people left the Lurch's house. They went to William's apartment in Columbus. The party continued there. They kept drinking and using cocaine the next morning. On the morning of August 14th, 1982, the argument started again. Christopher Lurch said something to William. Christopher claimed he had a sexual relationship with Teresa Kemp. This made William very angry. William hit Christopher on the head several times. Then William put handcuffs on Christopher. He handcuffed Christopher to the kitchen table. Now Christopher could not move. He was stuck to the table. Peggy Lurch was asleep or passed out from the drugs and alcohol. Teresa Kemp was still there watching. William went upstairs to his bathroom. Then he called for Christopher to come help him. Christopher was still handcuffed to the table. So it is not clear how Christopher got free or went upstairs. But according to what Teresa Kemp later told police, Christopher went upstairs. When Christopher reached the upstairs bathroom, William attacked him. William used a knife. He cut Christopher's throat. The cut was deep. Christopher Lurch bled to death in the bathtub. His throat was slit open. William came back downstairs. He was alone. Teresa Kemp asked where Christopher was. William did not say. Teresa went upstairs to check. She went into the bathroom. She found Christopher Lurch's body. He was lying dead in the bathtub. Blood was everywhere. Teresa came back downstairs. She was scared. She did not know what to do. Peggy Lurch was still asleep or unconscious downstairs. She did not know her husband was dead. William told Teresa they had to take care of Peggy. He meant they had to kill her too. Teresa did not want to do this. But William ordered her to help. He gave her a command. He told Teresa to hold Peggy's legs down. Teresa obeyed. She lay across Peggy Lurch's legs so Peggy could not kick or move. William took a rope. He wrapped the rope around Peggy Lurch's neck while she was still unconscious. Then he pulled the rope tight. He strangled her. Peggy Lurch died without waking up. She did not fight because she was passed out from drugs. Now both Christopher and Peggy Lurch were dead inside William's apartment. William was not done. He had worked in a prison slaughterhouse. He knew how to cut up bodies. He took both bodies upstairs to the bathroom. He put them in the bathtub. Then he used a knife and a folding saw. He cut the bodies into smaller pieces. He cut off Christopher Lurch's head. According to Teresa, she later went upstairs and saw William holding Christopher's severed head in his hand. While William was cutting the bodies, he told Teresa to clean up the blood. She cleaned the bathroom. She wiped down surfaces. But she could not clean everything. Blood got into the caulk around the bathtub. Caulk is the sealant between the tub and the wall. The blood soaked into the caulk. Dried human tissue stuck to the folding saw that William used. After the bodies were cut into pieces, William put the pieces into trash bags. He closed the bags tightly. Then he took the bags outside. He drove around the city of Columbus. He stopped at different dumpsters. These are large trash bins behind buildings. He threw the bags into the dumpsters. He used many different dumpsters, so no one would find all the parts in one place. The bodies of Christopher and Peggy Lurch were never found. Teresa Kemp was scared of William. She did not go to the police. She kept quiet. A few weeks passed. On August 25th, 1982, someone filed a missing persons report for Christopher and Peggy Lurch. Their families had not heard from them. The police started looking. William was not worried at first. He had hidden the evidence. He had gotten rid of the bodies. But then he was arrested for an unrelated crime. He went back to prison on a burglary conviction. While William was in prison, Teresa Kemp married another man. She had a baby son, but she still visited William in prison. She was still afraid of him. She also still cared about him in some way. William told Teresa what to do with his belongings. He had jewelry that belonged to the Lurks. He told Teresa to put that jewelry in a safety deposit box. He told her to put other items in storage. She did what he said. The police kept investigating the missing couple. They talked to people. They got tips from informants. One informant was William's former common-law wife. Another informant was a friend of William's. Both of them told police that William had confessed to killing the Lurks. But the former wife was later barred from testifying. The friend refused to testify because he was afraid William would kill him. He was charged with contempt of court for not talking. The police also learned about Teresa Kemp. They went to question her. At first, she said she knew nothing, but the police pressured her. They told her she could be charged with murder. They told her she could face the death penalty. Teresa became scared for herself and for her baby. So she decided to tell the police everything. She told them about the weekend of drugs and drinking. She told them about the argument over $6,000. She told them about Christopher's throat being slit in the bathtub. She told them about holding Peggy's legs while William strangled her. She told them about the saw and the trash bags and the dumpsters. She took the police to the safety deposit box. Inside were the Lurks' jewelry and other items. The police now had a witness. They had some physical evidence, too. They went to William's apartment. It had been 2 years since the murders, but they still found dried human blood in the caulk around the bathtub. They found dried human tissue and blood on the folding saw. They found the handcuffs that had been used on Christopher Lurch. William was still in prison on the burglary charge when the police came to arrest him for murder. He was charged with 2 counts of aggravated murder. 1 count was for killing Christopher Lurch. The other count was for killing Peggy Lurch. The state of Ohio said the murder of Peggy Lurch was especially serious because she was killed to cover up the first murder. William denied everything. He said Teresa Kemp was lying. He said she was a jealous woman who made up the story. He said he had the Lurks' jewelry as collateral for the $6,000 debt. He said the Lurks must have disappeared for some other reason. He said he was innocent. But the police and prosecutors believed Teresa Kemp. They did not charge her with any crime because she did not help kill Christopher. She only helped kill Peggy because she was forced to, and she told the truth to the police. So she was allowed to go free. Now William Dean Wickline sat in prison waiting for his trial. He was accused of killing 2 people, cutting up their bodies, and throwing them away like trash. The trial was set for 1985. William Wickline went to trial in 1985. He did not want a jury to decide his case. He chose to be tried by a panel of 3 judges. This was his right under Ohio law. The 3 judges would listen to the evidence and decide if he was guilty. The trial took place in Franklin County Common Pleas Court. The prosecutor was Mike Miller. An assistant prosecutor named Pat Sheeran helped him. Their main witness was Teresa Kemp. She testified in front of the 3 judges. She was shaking and scared, but she told them everything she saw. The judges also saw physical evidence. The police brought in the folding saw that had dried human tissue on it. They showed the handcuffs that had been used on Christopher Lurch. They showed the caulk taken from the bathtub. Tests proved the blood on the caulk was human blood. The jewelry from the safety deposit box was shown as well. The jewelry had belonged to the Lurks. William Wickline testified in his own defense. He did not swear an oath. He gave an unsworn statement. He said Teresa Kemp was lying because he had broken up with her. He said she was a jealous woman who wanted revenge. He said the Lurks' jewelry was given to him as collateral for the drug debt. He said he did not kill anyone. He said he did not know what happened to Christopher and Peggy Lurch. The three judges did not believe William. They found him guilty on both counts of aggravated murder. One count was for the death of Christopher Lurch. The other count was for the death of Peggy Lurch. The judges also found a death specification on the second count. A death specification means there was an extra reason for the death penalty. In this case, the judges said Peggy Lurch was killed to cover up the murder of her husband. That made her murder eligible for the death sentence. Now the trial moved to the penalty phase. The judges had to decide if William would get life in prison or death. William's lawyers did not bring in any witnesses about his past. They did not hire a mental health expert. They did not present evidence about his childhood or family. William himself did not want them to do that. He controlled his own defense. He told his lawyers not to investigate or present that kind of information. The state of Ohio argued that William deserved death. The prosecutor compared the crime to terrible acts from history. The three judges listened to both sides. On September 20th, 1985, the judges announced their sentence. For the murder of Christopher Lurch, William received life in prison with the possibility of parole after 20 years. For the murder of Peggy Lurch, William received the death penalty. He would be executed by lethal injection. William appealed his case. He asked higher courts to look at his trial. He said his lawyers did not do a good job. He said they should have investigated his past to try to get life instead of death. He filed appeals in state courts and federal courts. The Ohio Court of Appeals affirmed his conviction in 1988. The Ohio Supreme Court affirmed it in 1990. The United States Supreme Court refused to hear his case in 1990. While William was appealing, something else happened. In April 1985, a grand jury in Wood County, West Virginia, indicted William for another murder. This was the murder of a man named Charles Morgan Marsh. Charles Marsh was killed in November 1979. His body was found on a bed. His head had been cut off and placed on a nightstand. The house had been ransacked. About $30,000 in cash was found under the mattress. Police believed the murder was connected to drugs. William had not been charged for that crime before, but now the prosecutor in Wood County wanted to try him. However, William was already on death row in Ohio. The West Virginia prosecutor made a deal. William would waive his right to a speedy trial in West Virginia. In exchange, West Virginia would not take him from Ohio to face trial. The murder charge remained pending. It was never resolved before William's execution. Back in Ohio, William kept filing appeals. He asked for clemency twice. Clemency is mercy from the governor. The first request was in 1996. The Ohio Parole Board recommended against clemency. Governor Bob Taft also refused to stop the execution. William's lawyers kept fighting in federal court. In 2003, the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals rejected his habeas corpus petition. That was his last major appeal. On March 29, 2004, the day before his scheduled execution, William's lawyers made one final request to the United States Supreme Court. They argued that his trial lawyers did not investigate his background for the penalty phase. The Supreme Court turned down the request without any comment. No more appeals were possible. That same day, William was moved from death row at Mansfield Correctional Institution to the Southern Ohio Correctional Facility in Lucasville. He spent most of the day on the phone with his brother David. He talked with members of the execution team. He met with a Baptist minister named Gary Sims. He was served his final meal. The meal was an 8-ounce filet mignon cooked medium rare, potato salad, 6 rolls with butter, fresh strawberries over shortcake, and butter pecan ice cream. He also received 4 packs of Pall Mall cigarettes and 6 cans of soda. 3 of the sodas were Mountain Dew. William slept about 5 hours that night. In the morning, he showered and shaved. He drank 2 cups of coffee and ate Rice Krispies cereal. He read the Bible and prayed. At 10:11 a.m. on March 30th, 2004, William Dean Wickline was led into the death chamber. He was 52 years old. In the witness room, Peggy Lurch's sister held up a framed photo of Peggy. She held it toward the window so William could see it. William did not look at her. Instead, he smiled and gave a thumbs up to his two younger brothers, Robert and David, who were also watching. He then spoke his final words. May tomorrow see the courts shaped by more wisdom and less politics. The lethal injection was given. William Dean Wickline was pronounced dead. He became the 11th person executed in Ohio since the state resumed executions in 1999. He was the 906th person executed in the United States since 1976. The bodies of Christopher and Peggy Lurch were never found. Their families lived with that loss forever. Peggy Lurch's son from a previous marriage was 4 years old when she was killed. He only knew his mother from photographs. Teresa Kemp, the witness, said she could not sleep soundly for 22 years. She said she still walked into a bathroom sometimes and smelled blood. The murder charge in West Virginia for the death of Charles Morgan Marsh remained pending at the time of William's execution. After he was put to death, that charge was never brought to trial. William Dean Wickline died protesting his innocence, but the three judges, the appeals courts, and the state of Ohio all concluded that he was the one who slit Christopher Lurch's throat, strangled Peggy Lurch with a rope, cut their bodies into pieces, and threw them away in dumpsters around Columbus. Story 3. Dennis Mitchell Orb was born on June 22, 1964. His birth mother was Bridget Branch. His biological father left the family when Dennis was very young. Dennis did not have a relationship with his father growing up. After his father left, his mother married another man. This man became Dennis's stepfather. The stepfather's name was Willis L. Branch. Junior Dennis lived with his mother and stepfather. During his childhood, Dennis was abused by his stepfather. The abuse caused Dennis emotional pain. Dennis went to school like other children. He grew up in Virginia. As he got older, he started drinking alcohol. He drank heavily over many years. His drinking became a problem. He had trouble controlling his impulses. A psychologist later said that Dennis had an impulse control dysfunction. This meant he sometimes acted without thinking about the results of his actions. As a young man, Dennis got married. He and his wife had 2 children. Dennis loved his children. He wanted to be a good father, but his marriage did not last. His wife and he separated. After the separation, Dennis felt like he had failed as a father and as a husband. He became very sad and depressed. He stopped being able to pay child support. He lost his job. His life started to fall apart. Dennis tried to find his biological father. He wanted to see him again. He thought about his father often. The abandonment by his father stayed with him. Around the time his marriage ended, Dennis became suicidal. He thought about killing himself. He told a psychologist later that he had suicidal intentions for at least a year before the events of January 1998. He was depressed and felt hopeless. Dennis continued to drink alcohol. His behavior started to change. People who knew him noticed that he was not acting like himself. He was not the same person they had known before. His stepfather had a .357 Magnum revolver in the home where Dennis lived. During the first or second week of January 1998, the gun went missing from the home. Dennis's stepfather later discovered that the gun was gone. Dennis was living in Chesterfield County, Virginia, at this time. He was 33 years old. He had no stable job. He had no stable home. He was separated from his wife and children. He was drinking heavily. He was depressed and thinking about death. He had found his biological father, but could not reconnect with him in a meaningful way. His life had no direction. He felt trapped and alone. On January 21, 1998, Dennis Orb began a series of crimes. He was still living in Chesterfield County at that time. On that day, he broke into a home. The home belonged to a woman named Lois Jones. She lived with her boyfriend, Mark Skugel. When Skugel came home, he found Orb hiding in a bedroom. Orb pointed a gun at Skugel. The gun was the .357 Magnum revolver he had taken from his stepfather's home. Orb ordered Skugel to drive him away because he was hiding from the police. Lois Jones heard what was happening. She went to a gun cabinet in her home. She took out a gun and loaded it. She went out onto her front porch. She tried to stop Orb from leaving with her boyfriend. There was conflicting testimony later about whether Jones fired her gun into the air. But Orb shot at Jones twice. The second shot hit Jones in her calf. The bullet shattered the bone in her leg. Orb then demanded that Skugel give him the car keys. Skugel refused. Orb ran away from the scene. Later that same day, January 21st, 1998, Orb went to Richmond, Virginia. He found two elderly men sitting in a front yard. The men were Charles Powell and William Bottoms. Orb approached them. He ordered them to walk to the back of the house. He showed them his gun. He told them he had nothing to lose. He asked them where their cars were. He asked for their keys and wallets. Then he took Powell's car and drove away in it. Over the next several days, Orb continued to commit crimes. He was living in a stolen car. On January 23, 1998, he went into the Exxon convenience store in York County 2 separate times. He did not buy anything. He was looking at the store and the clerk. The clerk working at night was a 39-year-old man named Richard Sterling Burnett. Burnett was white. He lived with his girlfriend, Kathy P. Linton. He worked alone as the night clerk at the store. On January 24, 1998, at about 3:30 in the morning, Orb drove to the same Exxon station. He needed gasoline. He tried to pump gas, but the pump required prepayment. He had no money. He was cold and tired. He decided to rob the store to get money for gas. Orb entered the store at approximately 3:38 a.m. He walked up to the checkout counter where Burnett was standing. Orb pointed the .357 Magnum revolver at Burnett's chest. He told Burnett to give him the money. Burnett looked at Orb and looked at the gun. Orb cocked the hammer of the revolver. He told Burnett again to give him the money. Burnett then opened the cash register drawer. At this point, Burnett took 1 or 2 steps back from the counter. Orb thought Burnett might be trying to figure out a way to stop him. Orb extended his arm to point the gun directly at Burnett's chest. Orb was shaking. He later said he was as scared as Burnett was. When he extended the gun, it went off. The bullet hit Burnett in the front of his left chest. The bullet traveled through Burnett's body and lodged in the right side of his back. Burnett was still standing at first. He clutched his chest. He struggled to remain upright. Orb saw a hole in Burnett's sweater and smoke coming from it. Orb panicked. He walked around the counter. He reached into the cash register drawer. He took money from it. The amount missing from the drawer was later determined to be $90.65. Orb then ran out of the store and fled. Burnett fell to the floor behind the counter. He bled internally. The bullet had injured his heart, his liver, and his lung. He died from blood loss. A customer came into the store a short while later. The customer found Burnett's body and called for emergency help. After the murder, Orb continued his crime spree. On January 30th, 1998, he broke into a private residence in New Kent County, Virginia. He was inside the house when 3 women arrived to do cleaning work. The women were Karen Glenn, Patricia Tuck, and a third woman. Orb approached them with his gun. He yelled at them. He hit Tuck between her shoulder blades with the gun. He ordered the women to crawl on their stomachs to a bedroom. He made them go into a closet. Then he nailed a piece of plywood across the closet door. The women were trapped inside for approximately 4.5 hours. While the women were trapped, Orb told them his name. He said, "I'm Dennis Orb. I'm wanted for murder, and it doesn't matter what I do." He ordered the women to empty their pockets. He took money, checks, and other valuables from them. He also took the keys to Glenn's car. Then he stole the car and drove away. On January 31st, 1998, Orb was still driving the stolen car in Richmond. He had the .357 Magnum revolver in his possession. He had committed at least 2 shootings, one of which killed Richard Burnett. He had committed robberies, a home invasion, abductions, and thefts across Chesterfield County, York County, New Kent County, and Richmond. His crime rampage lasted 10 days in total, from January 21st to January 31st. After the customer found Richard Burnett's body and called for help, the York County Sheriff's Office responded. An investigator named F.D. Lyons arrived at the store around 4:25 a.m. on January 24th, 1998. He found Burnett's body on the floor behind the register. Investigator Lyons collected evidence from the store. The most important piece of evidence was the videotape from the store's surveillance system. The camera focused on the cash register had recorded the entire event. Investigator Lyons took the videotape to the sheriff's office. He used computer equipment to view the tape frame by frame. He captured still images from the video. He digitized and saved those images. Then he printed several of the pictures. He distributed the printed images to area law enforcement agencies and to the media. When the pictures were shown on television news broadcasts and in newspapers, people started calling the sheriff's office. Several callers identified the man in the pictures as Dennis Orb. One of those callers was Orb's own stepfather, Willis Branch. Orb's mother also saw the images. They recognized him. Based on these identifications, investigator Lyons obtained warrants charging Orb with capital murder, robbery, and use of a firearm. At that time, Orb had not been caught yet. On January 31st, 1998, police in Richmond spotted Orb driving the stolen car that belonged to Karen Glenn, one of the cleaning women he had trapped in the closet. Police began a high-speed chase. Orb drove across a concrete median strip. He struck a telephone pole. He drove on the wrong side of the road. He ran through a roadblock that police had set up. Eventually, he jumped out of the car and ran on foot. Police chased him to the end of an alley, where they caught him. After placing Orb under arrest, a police officer searched his person. The officer found a partially loaded .357 Magnum revolver in the waistband of Orb's pants. Investigator Lyons later took possession of the gun. Willis Branch, Orb's stepfather, identified the gun as the one missing from his home. A forensic scientist tested the revolver along with the bullet that had been removed from Burnett's chest during the autopsy. The scientist concluded that the bullet had been fired from that exact revolver. Orb faced multiple charges in different jurisdictions. In York County, he was tried for the capital murder of Richard Burnett. The trial took place in August 1998. The jury was made up of 10 women and 2 men. The prosecutor was Eileen M. Addison. Orb's defense lawyers were Andrew Protogyra and Damian Horn. The videotape was played for the jury. It clearly showed Orb pointing the gun at Burnett and shooting him after Burnett opened the cash register. Orb did not testify during the trial. The jury found Orb guilty of capital murder, robbery, and 2 firearms charges. Then came the sentencing phase. The Commonwealth presented evidence of Orb's other crimes to show that he would be a future danger to society. They presented Lois Jones, who testified about being shot in the leg. They presented evidence about the 2 elderly men robbed in Richmond. They presented Karen Glenn and Patricia Tuck, who testified about being trapped in the closet. The defense presented testimony from Orb's mother and stepfather about his troubled childhood and his alcohol abuse. They also presented a psychologist, Dr. Thomas A. Pasquale, who said Orb was depressed, suicidal, and had impulse control problems. The jury deliberated for about 4.5 hours. On August 16, 1998, they recommended the death penalty. They also recommended 50 years for the robbery and 5 years for each of the 2 firearms charges. The jury based the death sentence on Orb's future dangerousness. On October 27, 1998, Judge N. Prentice Smiley, Jr. held the formal sentencing hearing. Orb did not ask for mercy. Instead, he spoke for 25 minutes. He apologized for the killing. He said he did not mean to shoot Burnett. He said he was scared and confused that morning. He told the judge, "If it means taking my life to justify the taking of his, take it. You can have it." Judge Smiley followed the jury's recommendation and sentenced Orb to death. The execution date was set for March 31, 1999, though appeals would delay that date for several years. Orb appealed his case to the Virginia Supreme Court. In 1999, that court affirmed his convictions and death sentence. He then filed petitions for habeas corpus in federal court. The United States District Court for the Eastern District of Virginia dismissed his petitions in 2002. The United States Court of Appeals for the Fourth Circuit also denied relief in 2003. Orb also pleaded guilty to the other crimes. In Richmond, he received a 15-year sentence for the robbery of the 2 elderly men. In New Kent County, he received an additional 53 years for the abduction and robbery of the 3 cleaning women. In Chesterfield County, he faced additional charges related to shooting Lois Jones. As his execution date approached, Orb's lawyers filed final appeals. They argued that Virginia's method of lethal injection was cruel and unusual punishment. They said the sedative could wear off before the drugs that stop the heart were administered. The Virginia Supreme Court rejected this argument on March 30, 2004. The United States Supreme Court also declined to intervene. Orb's lawyers asked Governor Mark R. Warner for a temporary reprieve to delay the execution until the method was changed. Governor Warner declined to intervene on the evening of March 31, 2004. On March 31, 2004, at approximately 9 p.m., Dennis Mitchell Orb was led into the death chamber at the Greensville Correctional Center in Jarrett, Virginia. He was accompanied by a Catholic nun who served as his spiritual advisor. She held a small wooden cross to his lips. He kissed it. He was strapped to a gurney. An official asked if he wanted to make a final statement. Orb quietly said, "No." He closed his eyes. The lethal injection was administered. He was pronounced dead at 9:13 p.m. His final meal had been fried chicken breasts, French fries, green beans, and a plain chocolate brownie. Richard Burnett's family did not attend the execution, but the prosecutor and lead investigator were present as witnesses. Dennis Orb was 39 years old when he died. Story 4. Jerry Bridwell McWee was born on December 29, 1952. He was a white male born in the United States. His family lived in the South. Jerry grew up in a family that had many mental health problems. His mother suffered from depression and anxiety. His father also had depression and anxiety. His sister and his brother both had mental health issues as well. All of these family members received medical treatment for their conditions. Jerry himself started showing signs of mental illness when he was 10 years old. He had hallucinations. This means he saw things that were not really there. One of the things he saw was a dead cousin who appeared to him. He also had severe depression with psychotic features. This condition made it hard for him to know what was real and what was not real. He had delusional thinking, which means he believed things that were not true. Despite these mental health problems, Jerry did not get into trouble with the law when he was young. He had no criminal record as a child or as a young adult. He finished his schooling. He wanted to work in law enforcement. Jerry became a police officer in Augusta, Georgia. He worked there for about 2 years. During that time, he performed his duties as an officer. He also worked as an EMT. An EMT is an emergency medical technician. This job meant he helped injured or sick people before they got to a hospital. He learned how to check a person's pulse and how to tell if someone was hurt badly. Later, Jerry got injured while working. The injury was serious enough that he became disabled. He could no longer work as a police officer or as an EMT. He needed to find new work. Jerry started working as a security guard at a local diner. It was at this diner that he met a man named George Scott. George Scott had a long criminal history. He had been in trouble with the law many times before. Jerry and George became roommates. They started living together. Jerry had never been in trouble with the law before he met George Scott. But after they became roommates, Jerry's life began to change. He started looking for money to buy drugs. He needed more and more money. He did not have a steady job because of his disability. His mental health problems were still present. He was not receiving proper treatment for his hallucinations and depression. Jerry's family continued to struggle with their own mental health issues. His mother, father, sister, and brother all remained in treatment. Jerry's own daughters and nieces also developed mental health problems and depression. 3 of his maternal aunts had similar issues. The family history of mental illness was strong, but Jerry did not get the help he needed. By the time Jerry was 38 years old, he was living with George Scott. He was using drugs. He needed money. He had no criminal record before this point in his life. But he was about to make choices that would change everything. Jerry McWee was 38 years old. He needed money to buy drugs. He lived with George Scott. George Scott had been in trouble with the law many times before. Together, they started looking for easy ways to get cash. On July 6, 1991, Jerry and George drove to a rural area in Aiken County, South Carolina. They found a small convenience store. The name of the store was the 19 Corner Store. It was in the country, far from the city. There were not many people around. The store clerk that day was a man named John Perry. John Perry was 32 years old. He was a white male. He had just moved to this area to get away from crime. He wanted a safer place to live and work. He was working alone in the store that day. Jerry and George made a plan. George would go into the store first. He would use the air hose outside to fill his tires. This would not look suspicious. While George was using the air hose, he would look around and see if anyone else was in the store. He would also see if there were any cameras or witnesses. George used the air hose. He saw that John Perry was the only person in the store. There were no customers. George then returned the air hose to its place. This was a signal to Jerry. Jerry entered the store. He was carrying a .38 caliber revolver. This is a type of handgun. He pointed the gun at John Perry. He told John to move to the back of the store. John Perry was scared. He asked for his life. He begged Jerry not to hurt him. Jerry did not listen. He took John Perry to the back room of the store. The back room was hidden from view. No one outside could see what was happening. Once they were in the back, Jerry raised his gun. He shot John Perry in the back of the head. He shot him twice. John Perry fell to the ground. He died right there. After shooting John, Jerry went to the cash register. He opened it and took out the money inside. He stole $350. He also took cigarettes and a gun that was in the store. He put everything in his pockets or a bag. Jerry then left the store. George Scott was waiting outside. They got back in their vehicle and drove away. They had gotten the money they needed for drugs. 1 week later, on July 13th, 1991, Jerry and George committed another murder. This time the victim was Jerry's boss. The man's name was David Willis. David Willis was a roofing contractor in Aiken. Jerry had worked for him. The 2 men went to David Willis's location. Jerry had a plan. He told George Scott that George would be the one to shoot this time. Jerry said that if George did not shoot David Willis, then Jerry would shoot George instead. George believed him. Jerry and George confronted David Willis. George Scott raised a gun and shot David Willis. But David did not die right away. Jerry was an EMT. He knew how to check if a person was still alive. He went to David Willis and put his fingers on David's neck to feel for a pulse. He found that David was still breathing and his heart was still beating. Jerry then told George where to shoot again. He gave George specific instructions. He said to shoot David Willis in a certain spot so that he would die for sure. George fired a second shot. This time, David Willis died. After the second murder, Jerry and George took money or other items from David Willis. They did not tell anyone what they had done. They went back to their normal routines. During this time, there were people who noticed things were wrong. Some people saw Jerry behaving strangely. Others noticed that John Perry had not shown up after his shift ended. But no one connected Jerry to the crimes yet. The police had not started a full investigation. The bodies had not been found right away. Jerry and George thought they had gotten away with both murders. The police started looking into the death of John Perry. They went to the 19 Corner store and found his body. They saw that money was missing from the cash register. They began asking questions. George Scott was arrested first. He decided to cooperate with the police. He told them everything that happened. He said that Jerry McWee shot John Perry. He also told them about the second murder of David Willis. George admitted that he fired the shots that killed David Willis, but he said Jerry made him do it. George said Jerry told him to shoot, or else Jerry would shoot George. The police arrested Jerry McWee. Jerry was charged with murder and armed robbery for the death of John Perry. He was also charged with murder for the death of David Willis. The case went to trial in Aiken County. The trial took place in 1994. Jerry was 41 years old at the time of the trial. The judge was Luke N. Brown. Jr. The prosecutor was Barbara Morgan. George Scott testified against Jerry at the trial. George told the jury what happened inside the store. He said Jerry took John Perry to the back and shot him twice. He also told the jury about the second murder. He said Jerry took David Willis's pulse and told George where to shoot again to make sure David died. George Scott made a deal with the prosecutors. He pleaded guilty to both murders. In exchange for his testimony against Jerry, George received a life sentence. He would spend the rest of his life in prison with no chance of parole. George did not get the death penalty because he cooperated. The jury listened to all the evidence. They found Jerry McWee guilty of murder and armed robbery for killing John Perry. Then the same jury had to decide if Jerry would get life in prison or the death penalty. During this penalty phase, the jury sent a note to the judge. The note asked, "Under South Carolina law, is there a minimum number of years that must be served of a life sentence before a person can get parole?" The judge refused to answer the question. He told the jury to use the plain and ordinary meaning of the words life imprisonment and death penalty. The jury did not know that Jerry would have to serve 30 years before becoming eligible for parole. They also did not know that Jerry would be 71 years old before he could be released. One juror later admitted that he changed his vote from life to death because another juror told him Jerry might get parole in 15 years. This information was not true, but the judge did not correct the jury's misunderstanding. The jury voted for the death penalty. On January 23, 1994, Judge Brown sentenced Jerry McWee to death. Jerry also pleaded guilty to murder for killing David Willis. For that crime, he received a life sentence. This meant that even if he had not gotten the death penalty for killing John Perry, he would have spent the rest of his life in prison for killing David Willis. Jerry appealed his death sentence. His lawyers argued that the jury should have been told about parole eligibility. The South Carolina Supreme Court heard the case in 1996. They upheld the death sentence. Jerry then asked the United States Supreme Court to hear his case. In 1997, the U.S. Supreme Court refused to hear it. The death sentence remained. Jerry filed more appeals over the next several years. He asked for a writ of habeas corpus. This is a legal way to challenge a prison sentence. The federal courts looked at his case. In 2002, the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals denied his request. The U.S. Supreme Court refused again to hear his case in 2002. On death row, Jerry behaved well. In 10 years, he committed only one minor infraction. The infraction was that his family gave him more than $25 for things like shampoo and toothpaste. The prison considered the extra money to be contraband. In April 2004, the South Carolina Supreme Court set an execution date. Jerry would die on April 16, 2004. His lawyers filed one last appeal to the U.S. Supreme Court. They argued that the jury should have known Jerry would be 71 before parole. On April 14, 2004, the U.S. Supreme Court refused to stop the execution. Jerry also asked Governor Mark Sanford for clemency. Clemency means mercy. Jerry asked to have his sentence reduced to life in prison without parole. He said it was unfair that George Scott got life while Jerry got death. On April 15, 2004, Governor Sanford denied the request. No governor in South Carolina had reduced a death sentence since the death penalty was reinstated in 1976. On April 16, 2004, Jerry McWee was taken to the Capital Punishment Facility at Broad River Correctional Institution in Columbia, South Carolina. He was 51 years old. He was given a final meal. He chose steak, jumbo fried shrimp, broccoli with cheese, French fries, lemon meringue pie, and iced tea. His mother, Celia McWee, came to watch. A member of John Perry's family also came to watch. Jerry was strapped to a gurney. His arms were extended. Intravenous tubes were attached to his arms. The execution method was lethal injection. The curtain opened so the witnesses could see him. Jerry glanced at the witnesses. He blew 2 kisses to his mother. His mother blew a kiss back. Jerry then looked up at the ceiling and mumbled. His lawyer read Jerry's final statement. The statement said, "I only wish that things could have been different. I would give anything if only that could have been the case." Jerry asked both his family and John Perry's family to forgive him. A tear formed in Jerry's eye. His breathing became shallow and then stopped. The tear rolled down the side of his head. At 6:18 p.m., he was officially declared dead. After the execution, John Perry's wife and family issued a statement. They thanked the community, law enforcement, and prosecutors. They said it was not a time to rejoice. They asked people to pray for Jerry McWee's soul. Celia McWee, Jerry's mother, thanked the protesters who had gathered outside the prison. She said she hoped her son's death would bring peace to the Perry family. Jerry McWee was the 30th inmate executed in South Carolina since 1976, and the 908th inmate executed in the United States since 1976. George Scott remained in prison serving his life sentence. John Perry's family continued to live with the loss of a husband and father who had moved to a rural town to escape crime, only to be killed there. Story 5. Jason Scott Byram was born on September 25, 1965. His birth mother drank alcohol while she was pregnant with him. This caused a condition called fetal alcohol syndrome. Because of this, Jason was born very small. He weighed only 3 pounds at birth. His brain did not develop the way a healthy baby's brain should. He had developmental delays. This meant he learned to walk, talk, and think more slowly than other children his age. Jason did not stay with his birth parents. As a baby, he was moved from one home to another. He lived in 6 different foster homes before he turned 4 years old. He did not have a stable family. He did not have one set of parents who cared for him for very long. He was passed from house to house. This made it hard for him to feel safe or loved. When Jason was about 6 months old, he was placed with a family that would later adopt him. His adoptive mother was named Ruby Byram. Ruby was harsh with her punishment. One week after Jason came to live with her, she told a case worker that she had beaten Jason until her wrist hurt. The beatings did not stop. They continued for years. Jason was hit and hurt many times. The abuse was severe. At one point, social services learned about the abuse. They planned to remove Jason from the home to protect him. But a family friend, who was also a legislator, was contacted. This person stopped the protective action. So Jason stayed in the abusive home. He was not rescued. The system that was supposed to protect him failed. Jason had trouble in school. He was slow to learn. His intelligence was tested and found to be in what experts called the dull normal range. This meant he was not intellectually disabled, but he was below average. He struggled with many subjects. He also had emotional problems because of the abuse and instability he suffered as a child. As Jason grew older, his behavior became difficult. He did not have good social skills. He had trouble making friends. He did not learn how to control his emotions or make good decisions. The abuse he suffered as a young child left deep marks on his mind and behavior. No one helped him deal with these problems. When Jason became an adult, he moved from place to place. He did not have a steady job or a stable home. He lived in boarding houses and rented rooms. He did not have a normal, settled life. He kept to himself much of the time. He had few close relationships. His childhood had not prepared him to live a calm, law-abiding life. By the time Jason was in his late 20s, he had already developed patterns of behavior that would lead him into trouble. But he had not yet committed the act that would define the rest of his life. He was still living day to day, with no clear direction. He was angry inside. He was damaged by what had been done to him as a child, and he did not know how to change. On May 22, 1993, Jason Scott Byram was 27 years old. He did not have a home of his own. He was staying in a boarding house in Columbia, South Carolina. He did not have much money. He needed things he could not pay for, so he decided to break into a house and steal. He went out late that night. He walked through a neighborhood looking for a house that would be easy to enter. He found a house on a quiet street. The house belonged to a woman named Julie Johnson. Julie was 36 years old. She was an elementary school teacher. She taught children with emotional and behavioral problems. She had been a teacher for 12 years. She was married to a man named Jeff Johnson. They had 3 children. That night, all 3 children were asleep upstairs. Julie's husband was also asleep upstairs. Julie was on the living room couch. She was dozing, not fully asleep. Jason looked at the house. He saw a kitchen window. He broke the window to get inside. This happened in the early morning hours of May 23, 1993. The exact time was around 3 a.m. Once Jason was inside the kitchen, he looked around. He found a purse that belonged to Julie Johnson. He took the purse. Then he found the keys to the family's van. He went outside and took the van. He drove away. He had stolen the purse and the vehicle. But Jason was not finished. He drove the van somewhere else and hid it. Then he came back to Julie Johnson's house. He came back hours later. He wanted to steal more things. This time he wanted to take a television and a VCR. These items could be sold for money. When Jason re-entered the house, he went to the kitchen. He took a large butcher knife from the kitchen. He took it so he could use it if someone woke up. He did not want to be caught. Julie Johnson was still on the couch. She heard noises. She woke up. She saw Jason inside her living room. She was frightened. She may have tried to scream or call for help. Jason did not want her to make noise. He did not want her to wake up her husband or children. He did not want the police to be called. So Jason used the butcher knife. He stabbed Julie Johnson. He stabbed her repeatedly. The knife was sharp and large. The stabbing caused deep wounds. Julie was hurt very badly. After being stabbed, Julie did not die right away. She had enough strength to get up. She moved from the couch to the front yard of her house. She was bleeding heavily. Her husband woke up because of the noise. He came downstairs and went outside. A police officer also arrived. Julie spoke her final words to her husband and the officer. She told them that one person had attacked her. Then she stopped speaking. She was taken to the hospital, but her wounds were too severe. She died on the way to the hospital. Jason left the house after stabbing Julie. He took the television and VCR with him. He also had the van. He drove away from the neighborhood. He went back to the boarding house where he was staying. Later that morning, a person who rented a room in the same boarding house saw Jason. The person saw Jason sitting in a white van. That van was Julie Johnson's van. The person also saw blood on Jason's shirt. The person asked Jason where he got the van. Jason said the van belonged to a friend. He told the person not to tell anyone about the van. There was no other person in the van with Jason. He was alone. Jason went to his room. He took off the shirt with blood on it. He kept the shirt in his apartment. He did not wash it or throw it away. He did not know that the blood would later be used to prove what he had done. Jason told some people later that there was another man with him. He said the other man's name was Jim. He said he met Jim outside a bar. He described Jim as a bald man in his 30s, about 5 feet 7 inches tall, and weighing 180 pounds. Jason claimed that Jim was the one who stabbed Julie Johnson many times. Jason said he only stabbed her once to keep her quiet. He said Jim did the rest. But Jason was the only person who saw Jim. No one else ever saw this man. No one at the bar remembered seeing Jason or Jim that night. The bar was a private club. Jason was not a member. He did not sign in. The manager of the bar knew the members. There was no member named Jim who matched Jason's description. The manager also patrolled the parking lot that night. He saw no van in the lot. Jason's claim about an accomplice did not match what Julie Johnson said before she died. She said only one person attacked her. The person who saw Jason in the van that morning saw no one else with him. Jason was alone. The knife Jason used came from Julie's own kitchen. He did not bring a weapon with him. He used what was there. He did not plan to kill anyone when he first broke in. He only wanted to steal. But when Julie woke up, he made a choice. He decided to hurt her, so she could not identify him or call for help. That choice led him to stab her many times with the butcher knife. After the stabbing, Jason had the van, the purse, the television, and the VCR. He had left his fingerprint somewhere inside Julie's house. He did not wear gloves. He touched a surface inside the home. That fingerprint stayed there. It was a piece of evidence he did not know he had left behind. By the afternoon of May 23, 1993, Jason had gone back to his normal routine. He did not run away. He stayed in the area. He did not know that the police were already looking for him. He did not know that his fingerprint had been found. He did not know that a witness had seen him in the white van with blood on his shirt. The day of the crime was not over yet. The police were gathering information. They were talking to witnesses. They were building a case. Jason went about his day as if nothing had happened. But the evidence against him was already being collected piece by piece. The police arrived at Julie Johnson's house on the morning of May 23, 1993. They saw her body being taken to the hospital. They spoke to her husband. They looked at the broken kitchen window. They saw blood inside the house. They began to look for evidence. Inside the house, police found a fingerprint. The fingerprint was not from anyone in the Johnson family. They lifted the print from a surface that the killer had touched. They sent the print to be identified. Later that same day, police matched the fingerprint to Jason Scott Byram. His prints were on file because of previous contacts with law enforcement. The match was clear. The print belonged to him. Police also received information from the witness who lived in the same boarding house as Jason. The witness told police that he saw Jason in a white van that morning. He saw blood on Jason's shirt. He heard Jason say the van belonged to a friend. The witness gave police Jason's name and location. On the afternoon of May 23, 1993, police went to Jason's boarding house. They found him there. They arrested him. He did not try to run. He did not fight. After the arrest, police read Jason his rights. He signed a paper saying he understood his rights. Then he agreed to speak to the police. He gave a statement. In that statement, he admitted that he entered Julie Johnson's home. He admitted that he stabbed her to keep her quiet, but he said that another man named Jim did most of the stabbing and killed her. Police tried to find this man named Jim. They searched the bar where Jason said he met Jim. They talked to the bar manager. They checked the members. They looked for a bald man in his 30s who was 5 feet 7 inches and 180 pounds. They found no one. They found no evidence that any accomplice existed. The witness who saw Jason in the van saw no other person with him. Julie Johnson's final words said only one person attacked her. Police also searched Jason's room. They found the shirt he had been wearing. There was blood on the shirt. A DNA test was done later. The DNA on the shirt matched Julie Johnson's blood. This was strong proof that Jason was the one who stabbed her. Jason went to trial in Richland County, South Carolina. The trial started in February 1995 and ended in March 1995. The prosecutor was Barney Giese. Jason's lawyers were Douglas Strickler and Lee Cagiola. The judge was Gary Clary. At trial, the prosecution presented the fingerprint evidence. They showed that Jason's fingerprint was found inside the Johnson home. They presented the witness who saw Jason in the van with blood on his shirt. They presented the DNA test that matched Julie Johnson's blood to Jason's shirt. They presented Jason's own statement where he admitted entering the home and stabbing Julie. The defense tried to show that another man named Jim was the real killer. They called witnesses who said they knew a man named Jim. But those witnesses gave different descriptions of Jim. One said Jim was short and thin with a hair lip. Another said Jim was 5 feet 10 inches and 210 pounds. Another said Jim was about 5 feet 8 inches. The witness statements did not match each other. The man named Jim did not testify. No one saw Jim with Jason on the night of the crime. The judge ruled that the evidence about Jim was not strong enough to be presented to the jury. The jury found Jason guilty of murder, first-degree burglary, attempted armed robbery, and grand larceny of a motor vehicle. The same jury then heard evidence to decide if Jason should receive the death penalty for the murder. During the sentencing phase, the defense presented evidence about Jason's difficult childhood. A social worker named Evelyn Califf testified. She told the jury that Jason had been abused as a child. She said he was slow to develop. She said his intelligence was below average. But the defense did not present all the details of the abuse. They did not tell the jury that his adoptive mother beat him until her wrist hurt. They did not tell the jury that social services once tried to remove him from the home. The jury heard only a small part of his background. The jury took just over 1 hour to decide. They recommended the death penalty. The judge agreed with the recommendation. On March 9, 1995, Jason Scott Byram was sentenced to death for the murder of Julie Johnson. He was also sentenced to life in prison for burglary, 20 years for attempted armed robbery, and 10 years for grand larceny. After the sentence, Jason appealed his case. The South Carolina Supreme Court reviewed the case. On April 28, 1997, that court affirmed the conviction and death sentence. The court said there was no error. The court said the evidence against Jason was strong. The court said the jury's decision was not based on passion or prejudice. Jason then filed for post-conviction relief. This is a legal process where a convicted person asks for a new review of the case. He said his lawyers did not do a good job. He said they should have investigated his childhood more completely. A state court held a hearing and denied his request. The South Carolina Supreme Court also denied it. Jason then went to federal court. He filed a petition for a writ of habeas corpus. This is a request to be released because the conviction or sentence is unfair. The Federal District Court denied his petition. He appealed to the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals. On August 19, 2003, the Fourth Circuit also denied his petition. The court said his lawyers were not ineffective. The court said the investigation into his childhood was reasonable. Jason asked the United States Supreme Court to hear his case. The Supreme Court declined. It refused to review his appeal. This happened in March 2004. After that, Jason had no more legal options. The state of South Carolina scheduled Jason's execution for April 23, 2004. Jason had to choose the method of death. He first chose the electric chair. He thought it would be less painful. Then he changed his mind. He chose lethal injection instead. He said he did not want to put the witnesses through the stress of watching him die in the electric chair. On April 22, 2004, the South Carolina Supreme Court denied Jason's final request to stop the execution. There were no more appeals. On April 23, 2004, at 6 p.m., Jason was taken to the death chamber at the Broad River Road Correctional Institution in Columbia, South Carolina. He was dressed in a green jumpsuit. He was strapped to a gurney. His arms were stretched out. Needles were placed in his arms. Inside the death chamber, witnesses watched from behind a glass window. Julie Johnson's mother, Peggy Farrell, was there. She was 70 years old. She held her brother's hand. Julie's husband, Jeff Johnson, was also there. Jason's lawyer, Jay Elliott, read a statement that Jason had written. In the statement, Jason said, "While I maintain my innocence, I do want to express my condolences to the family of Mrs. Johnson, and I fully understand they only seek justice for their daughter." Jason also thanked the South Carolina Department of Corrections for how he was treated. The statement ended with a reading of John 3 verse 16 from the Bible. Then the statement said, "I believe." After the statement was read, Jason turned his head to the left. He looked at Peggy Farrell. He mouthed a few words. She could not hear him, but she believed he was apologizing. She nodded her head to thank him. Then Jason looked up at the ceiling. His eyes began to blink more slowly. Within about 30 seconds, he stopped blinking. He stared at the ceiling. The lethal chemicals had entered his body. At 6:15 p.m., prison officials pronounced him dead. After the execution, Jeff Johnson spoke to reporters. He said, "Justice was done for the citizens of South Carolina, not for me, not for my family." He said he and his children were doing very well 11 years after Julie's death. Peggy Farrell said she had no feelings of vindictiveness. She said she felt profound sorrow that she would carry for the rest of her life. She said she witnessed the execution to fulfill something she needed to fulfill for her daughter. Jason Scott Byram was the 31st person executed in South Carolina since the death penalty was reinstated in 1976. He was the third person executed in South Carolina in 2004. He was 27 years old when he committed the crime. He was 38 years old when he was executed. Julie Johnson's family continued to live their lives without her. Her children grew up without their mother. Her students never saw her again. The evidence that convicted Jason never changed. His fingerprint, his shirt with her blood, the witness who saw him in the van, and his own admission all pointed to the same fact. Jason Scott Byram broke into Julie Johnson's home, stole from her, and stabbed her to death, and no one else was there with him. Story 6. Kelsey Patterson was born on March 24, 1954, in Palestine, Texas. Palestine is a small city in the eastern part of the state. His mother died when he was only 4 years old. After his mother passed away, his maternal grandmother raised him. She took care of him and provided a home for him. Kelsey grew up as a normal child. He did not show any major problems during his early years. He went to school in Palestine and was an average student. He did not stand out as being very good or very bad in his classes. He had friends and seemed to live a regular life like other children in his town. After he finished high school, Kelsey joined the United States Air Force. He served in the military for 2 years. His time in the Air Force was uneventful. He did not get into any major trouble during his service. However, he did not complete a full career in the military. He received an honorable discharge. The reason he left the service was to take care of his grandmother. She had become very sick and was dying. Kelsey chose to leave the military so he could be with her and help her in her final days. After his grandmother died, Kelsey's behavior began to change. People who knew him noticed that he was not acting the same way as before. He became withdrawn. He would talk to himself or laugh alone for no clear reason. He also started to tape up the windows of his home. He did this because he believed someone was trying to watch him or harm him. In 1978, Kelsey had his first contact with the police. He was arrested for aggravated assault on a police officer. The following year, in 1979, he was charged with another assault. These were early signs that something was wrong, but at the time no one fully understood what was happening inside his mind. In May 1980, Kelsey was working at a hospital in Dallas. He worked alongside a man named Richard Lane. One day, without any warning or argument, Kelsey shot Richard Lane 2 times. Richard Lane survived the shooting, but he had to stay in the hospital for 3 months to recover. The police arrested Kelsey for attempted murder. However, a jury found that Kelsey was not competent to stand trial. This meant that the court decided he did not have the mental ability to understand the legal process or help his own lawyer. He was sent to a state mental hospital. While he was there, doctors diagnosed him with paranoid schizophrenia. Paranoid schizophrenia is a serious mental illness. People with this condition often believe that others are trying to hurt them. They may hear voices or think that outside forces are controlling them. The doctors at the Dallas County Jail also said that at the time of the shooting, Kelsey had a mental disease that made him unable to follow the law. The charges for shooting Richard Lane were later dismissed. After receiving treatment, Kelsey voluntarily committed himself to a mental hospital for more help. In 1983, Kelsey was living in Palestine again. He got a job at a pizza restaurant. He worked there with a man named Kevin Hughes. One day, Kelsey threw a pizza pan at Kevin and hit him in the head. Then Kelsey pulled out a gun and shot Kevin in the left arm and in the right lung. Kevin survived the attack. The police charged Kelsey with attempted murder once more. Again, psychiatrists examined him. They concluded that he had a mental disease at the time of the crime. They said he could not tell right from wrong or control his actions to follow the law. The charges were dismissed again. Kelsey was sent to mental hospitals on multiple occasions during the 1980s. He stayed at Rusk State Hospital and Terrell State Hospital. Each time he would stay for about 2 or 3 months. Then he would be released. In 1985 and 1986, Kelsey received misdemeanor convictions for assault, carrying a weapon, and marijuana possession. In 1986, he was arrested for assault on another coworker. While in custody, he told guards that they were putting sedatives in his food and raping him while he slept. He was sent to the Mental Diagnostic Center at Parkland Hospital in Dallas, and then to Terrell State Hospital for several months. In 1988, he was admitted again to Rusk State Hospital. The doctors there wrote down a diagnosis of schizophrenia paranoid chronic with acute exacerbation. This meant his illness was long-term and had periods where it became much worse. He was discharged after 1 month. Kelsey's family tried to get help for him many times. His half-brother and half-sister saw that his mental state was getting worse. They asked the authorities to do something, but each time, they were told that nothing could be done unless Kelsey became a danger to himself or to others. His family felt helpless. They watched as he stopped taking his medication and his condition grew worse again. By the early 1990s, Kelsey Patterson was a 38-year-old man living in Palestine. He had a history of violence that was clearly connected to his untreated mental illness. He had shot 2 different people in the past. He had been found legally insane both times. He had been in and out of mental hospitals. He had delusions that people were poisoning his food and putting devices inside his body to control him. He believed that his lawyers and doctors were part of a conspiracy against him. His family had tried to get him long-term care, but the system did not provide it. He was living on his own, without proper medication or supervision. On September 25, 1992, Kelsey Patterson was living in his home in Palestine, Texas. His home was located about 1 block away from a business called Oates Oil Company. That morning and early afternoon, Kelsey was acting strangely, but this was not new for him. He shared his home with a roommate. At some point that day, Kelsey told his roommate that he was going to go to the grocery store. He also said that this might be the last time his roommate would see him. His roommate did not know exactly what Kelsey meant by that statement. Around 3 p.m., Kelsey walked out of his front door. He was holding a .38 caliber pistol in his hand. Before leaving his yard, he fired 3 shots into an aluminum pan that was sitting in the front yard. He then reloaded the gun. After that, he started walking down the street. He was heading toward Oates Oil Company, which was only about a block away. Lewis Oates was the owner of Oates Oil Company. He was 63 years old. He was a white male. On that day, he was standing on the loading dock of his business. The loading dock was an outdoor platform where trucks would pull up to load or unload products. Lewis Oates was just standing there, doing his regular work. Kelsey Patterson walked up the steps to the loading dock. He approached Lewis Oates from behind. A truck driver named Lester Gross later saw what happened. He said that Patterson grabbed Lewis Oates by the collar of his shirt. Then, without saying any warning, Kelsey shot Lewis Oates in the head. Lewis Oates fell to the ground immediately. He was lying on the ground in front of the loading dock. He died at the scene. After shooting Lewis Oates, Kelsey Patterson started to walk away from the property. He did not run. He walked at a normal pace. But he did not go far. Dorothy Harris was Lewis Oates' secretary. She was 41 years old. She was a white female. She had been working inside her office, which was connected to the loading dock. She heard noises or sensed that something was wrong. She walked out of her office and onto the loading dock. When she got outside, she saw Lewis Oates' body lying on the ground. She saw the blood. She was very frightened. She began to scream loudly. Kelsey Patterson heard the screaming. He had not gone far from the business. He turned around and came back to the loading dock. A construction worker named Eddie Joel was working on the property that day. He saw what happened next. He said that Kelsey grabbed Dorothy Harris. Dorothy was begging for her life. She was yelling very loudly. Another witness, Mark Bashes, said that Kelsey never hesitated. Kelsey shot Dorothy Harris in the head. Before he shot her, he cursed at her and said, "You're going to get yours. You ain't going to get by with it." Dorothy Harris was seriously wounded. She was taken to a hospital in Tyler, Texas. She died the next day from her injuries. After shooting Dorothy Harris, Kelsey Patterson walked away from the scene again. This time he went back to his house. He walked inside. He put the .38 caliber pistol down somewhere in the house. Then he took off all of his clothes. He removed everything except his socks. Later, he explained that he took off his clothes because he did not want the police to think he was hiding a weapon. After he was naked except for his socks, he walked back outside. He started walking up and down the street in front of his home. He was shouting and making gestures at people who were watching him. He was not trying to hide. He was not running away. Several people in the neighborhood had heard the gunshots and the screaming. Some of them had seen Kelsey shoot the 2 victims. Others had seen him walking naked in the street. Someone called the police. The police arrived a short time later. They found Kelsey Patterson walking on the street in front of his home, still naked except for his socks. He was still shouting. The police arrested him right there. Kelsey Patterson did not have any normal motive for killing Lewis Oates and Dorothy Harris. He did not know them. They had never done anything to him. He did not rob them. He did not have an argument with them. He simply walked up and shot them. His own words and actions at the time of the crime showed that he was not thinking clearly. When he shot Dorothy Harris, he accused her of something she had not done. He said, "You ain't going to get by with it." But she had done nothing wrong. This was part of his delusional thinking. He believed that people were controlling him and that others were part of a conspiracy against him. Before the day of the murders, Kelsey had not made any detailed plan that a normal person would recognize. He did not write down a plan. He did not buy the gun specifically for this crime. He already owned the .38 caliber pistol. He did not disguise himself. He did not try to create an alibi. He did not try to escape after the shootings. Instead, he went home, took off his clothes, and walked outside naked. This behavior was not the behavior of someone who was trying to hide what he had done. It was the behavior of someone who was suffering from a severe mental illness. The two victims were innocent people going about their normal workday. Lewis Oates was the owner of a small business. He was 63 years old. He had worked hard to build his company. Dorothy Harris was his secretary and bookkeeper. She was 41 years old. She was a mother and a grandmother. Her daughter was 20 years old at the time, and her granddaughter was only 18 months old. Dorothy Harris was described by her family as a quiet woman who was active in her church and always willing to help others. On the day she was killed, she had just taken her parents out to lunch because their car had broken down. Lewis Oates had told her to go help them. She came back to work after lunch. A short time later, she walked out onto the loading dock and saw her boss lying dead on the ground. Then she was shot while she was screaming for help and begging for her life. Kelsey Patterson did not know either of these people. He had no personal connection to them. He chose them simply because they were there. He walked 1 block from his home, shot the first person he saw, and then shot the second person who came out and made noise. That was the full extent of his plan. He did not target them for any rational reason. He acted on impulses that came from his delusional mind. At the time of the murders, Kelsey Patterson was 38 years old. He was not under the influence of drugs or alcohol in a way that explained his actions. He was not trying to steal money or property. He was not trying to settle a score. He simply walked out of his house with a gun, shot 2 people, took off his clothes, and waited to be arrested. The police arrived at the street in front of Kelsey Patterson's home only a short time after the shootings. When they got there, they saw Patterson walking up and down the street. He was naked except for his socks. He was shouting and waving his arms. The officers did not have to search for him or chase him. He was right there in plain sight. They arrested him immediately. Because he had already taken off his clothes and put down his gun, the police did not have to use force to subdue him. They took him into custody and transported him to the local jail. At the scene of the crime, other officers secured the area around Oates Oil Company. They found Lewis Oates lying on the ground in front of the loading dock. He was already dead. Medical personnel arrived, but could not save him. Dorothy Harris was still alive when the first responders got to her, but she had been shot in the head. She was rushed to a hospital in Tyler, Texas. Doctors did everything they could, but her injuries were too severe. She died the next day, on September 26, 1992. The police collected evidence at the scene. They found the .38 caliber pistol inside Patterson's home after he told them where he had put it. They also spoke to witnesses who had seen the shootings. Lester Gross, the truck driver, told police that he saw Patterson grab Lewis Oates by the collar and shoot him in the head. Eddie Joel, the construction worker, told police that he saw Patterson return to shoot Dorothy Harris after she started screaming. Mark Bashes also gave a statement. The witnesses all gave consistent accounts of what happened. The physical evidence matched their statements. The case against Patterson was very strong from the beginning. On October 16, 1992, a grand jury indicted Kelsey Patterson for capital murder. Capital murder in Texas is a murder that involves certain special circumstances. In this case, the circumstance was that Patterson killed two people during the same criminal event. That made him eligible for the death penalty if he was convicted. The case then moved toward trial. However, Patterson's mental health became the central issue. Because he had been found incompetent to stand trial for the two previous shootings in 1980 and 1983, his lawyers asked the court to determine whether he was competent to stand trial now. A competency hearing was held in June 1993. The jury had to decide if Patterson understood the charges against him and could help his own lawyer. The prosecutors called psychologists who said Patterson was competent. The defense tried to show that his delusions made him unable to assist his lawyers. During the hearing, Patterson was removed from the courtroom because he kept interrupting. He talked about implants in his body and accused his own lawyers of being part of a conspiracy. Despite these outbursts, the jury found Patterson competent to stand trial. The trial began shortly after the competency hearing. The prosecutors presented the witnesses and the evidence. They did not have to prove a motive because Texas law does not require motive to convict someone of murder. They only had to prove that Patterson shot Lewis Oates and Dorothy Harris on purpose. The witnesses described exactly what they saw. The defense argued that Patterson was legally insane at the time of the crime. Under Texas law at that time, insanity meant that because of a mental disease or defect, the defendant did not know that his conduct was wrong. The defense brought their own experts, but the prosecutors argued that Patterson knew what he was doing was wrong because he walked away after the first shooting and then came back. They said that showed he understood he had done something illegal. During the trial, Patterson continued to act out. He interrupted the proceedings many times. He was removed from the courtroom on several occasions. At one point, the judge ordered that Patterson's mouth be taped shut and that his arms be taped to the arms of a chair so that he would stop disrupting the trial. The judge also had to remove Patterson from the courtroom for long periods. Because of this, Patterson missed nearly half of the testimony against him. Despite his absence, the trial continued under Texas law. On July 1, 1993, the jury took only about 2 hours to reach a verdict. They found Kelsey Patterson guilty of capital murder. The same jury then had to decide his punishment. The prosecutors presented evidence of Patterson's past violent acts, including the shootings in 1980 and 1983. The defense presented family members who testified that Patterson was a different person when he was on medication. They asked the jury to give him a life sentence. After deliberating for about 4 hours, the jury decided that Patterson would be a future danger to society and that there was not enough mitigating evidence to give him life in prison. They sentenced him to death. The judge formally imposed the death sentence on July 1, 1993. Patterson was sent to death row in Texas. He spent more than 10 years there. During that time, his lawyers filed many appeals. They argued that Patterson was mentally incompetent to be executed. Under a 1986 U.S. Supreme Court case called Ford v. Wainwright, a person who does not understand that he is going to be executed and why cannot be put to death. Patterson's lawyers said that he believed he had received a permanent stay of execution based on innocence. They said he believed that the courts had acquitted him. They pointed to his letters where he wrote about amnesty and a permanent stay. They also noted that he refused to cooperate with his own lawyers because he thought they were part of a conspiracy against him. The state courts reviewed these claims. In December 1997, a state court held a hearing. Patterson was asked if he understood that he had been convicted of killing Lewis Oates and Dorothy Harris. He said he understood what the conviction meant. He also said he did not want to die. The state court ruled that while Patterson was mentally ill, his illness did not prevent him from knowing that he was under a death sentence for taking the lives of his victims. The Texas Court of Criminal Appeals agreed in May 1998. Patterson's lawyers then took the case to federal court. A federal district judge held more hearings in 1999. Two mental health experts tried to examine Patterson, but he refused to meet with them. The experts said that his refusal was itself a product of his mental illness. The judge ruled in January 2001 that Patterson was competent to be executed. The judge wrote that the only thing required was that Patterson understand that he was going to be executed and why. The judge said that even though Patterson had delusions about having a permanent stay, he still showed awareness of his punishment. The U.S. Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals agreed in May 2003. The U.S. Supreme Court declined to hear the case in November 2003. After that, an execution date was set for May 18, 2004. Patterson's lawyers kept fighting. They filed more motions asking the courts to find Patterson incompetent to be executed. On March 26, 2004, the state trial court held another hearing. The judge asked Patterson directly if he understood that the execution date had been set for May 18, 2004. Patterson said no, because he had been told by the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals that he had a permanent stay based on innocence. The judge showed Patterson the death warrant. Patterson still said he did not accept that there were no more stays. The judge ruled that Patterson had not raised a substantial doubt about his competency. That meant the execution could go forward. On May 17, 2004, the day before the execution, the Texas Board of Pardons and Paroles voted 5-1 to recommend that Governor Rick Perry commute Patterson's death sentence to life in prison or grant a 120-day reprieve. This was a very rare action. It was the first time at such a late stage that the board had recommended clemency for a condemned inmate since Texas resumed executions in 1982. The board sent its recommendation to the governor. Governor Rick Perry reviewed the case. On the day of the execution, about 1 hour before Patterson was scheduled to die, Perry issued a statement. He said that state and federal courts had reviewed the case at least 10 times and had found no legal reason to stop the execution. He said that Patterson was a very violent individual. He noted that Texas did not have a life without parole option at that time, so no one could guarantee Patterson would never be freed. He denied the request for clemency and a stay. The U.S. Supreme Court also denied a stay that same day. On May 18, 2004, Kelsey Patterson was taken to the death chamber at the Walls Unit in Huntsville, Texas. He had refused to complete the paperwork for his execution. He did not ask for a special last meal. A tray of sandwiches and cookies was made available to him, and he accepted a candy bar and a soft drink. As witnesses entered the chamber, Patterson began to mumble. He said, "No kin, no kin, no kin. I'm not guilty of the charge of capital murder. Give me my rights. I'm acquitted of capital murder." The warden leaned over him and asked if he had a final statement. Patterson replied, "Statement to what? Statement to what? I'm not guilty of the charge of capital murder." He continued to ramble. He asked repeatedly for his rights. At one point he said, "Go to hell." Then he said, "Give me my life back." As he was speaking those words, the lethal drugs began to flow into his body. He gasped several times and took a deep breath. At 6:20 p.m., he was pronounced dead. He was 50 years old. After the execution, the victim's family spoke to reporters. Michelle Smith, the daughter of Dorothy Harris, cried as she thanked the governor for allowing her to have an end to the horrible time in her life. She said she could finally start again and find peace. The family of Lewis Oates also felt that justice had been done. Patterson's lawyer, Gary Hart, said he was outraged and disappointed. He believed the system had failed his client because of his mental illness. Mental health advocacy groups criticized Governor Perry's decision, but the friends and relatives of the two victims called the governor's decision courageous. Kelsey Patterson's body was handled according to prison procedures. The case was closed. Patterson never received the long-term mental health treatment that his family had tried to get for him over many years. Instead, he was executed for crimes that grew directly out of his untreated paranoid schizophrenia. The two victims, Lewis Oates and Dorothy Harris, remained dead. Their families continued to live with the loss, but the execution allowed them to feel that the legal process had reached its final end. The story of Kelsey Patterson ends with his death by lethal injection on May 18, 2004, while the two people he killed, Lewis Oates and Dorothy Harris, remained forever gone from the lives of those who loved them.